But Dylan, you've been away. You've been working
Hmm.
hard on an amazing podcast. I just listened to the first episode. One of the things that you had mentioned in the intro to it was that how learning about like cryptids, it kind of necessitates learning about the region in which
Hmm.
they are a part of. That got me thinking about, the Housewife franchises. How do you see them colored by their locality?
Well, I will say that when I read an Atlantic article from 1859 where the writer W.F. Myers refers to the residents of the Pine Barrens as rats, that really made me gasp and clutch my pearls, because I know from Housewives that how horrible that is for the Italian New Jersey community.
Like, the truth is, Daniel called her a rat.
What?
There's a lot you could call us that we don't get offended in New Jersey. You could call us you could call us a mother. But rat is probably the number one thing that you don't want to call someone.
But I've said it before on the show. One of the things I do love about the Housewives shows is that you get these little windows, often just in passing, into regional specificity and just like little characteristics and traditions that are particular to specific areas. New Jersey has a lot of great stuff like that. When they pronounce mozzarella like mozzarella and stuff. There's some good stuff in Miami, when they're talking about the Botanica, which inspired me to go visit a Botanica back a million years ago, when the show was a little baby. I think that was in 1996 when we were doing that episode.
Yeah.
But that's something that I love about these shows, because it's something that is rarely captured in like pure fiction. Like few screenwriters, I think, are going to like be able to muster enough specific regional details that instead of it just feeling like an obvious like handoff, like, oh, we're in Chicago, the pizza's deep, that will feel like genuine little that are genuine color, genuine shading that really just fill out the world and just give it a sense of reality. And I think when we talk about why reality TV feels more real, that's one of the kind of underrated aspects of it. Alongside, unscripted dialogue that can sound, rambling and weird, but more true to the way people actually talk, etc., is just what fills the world that they live in. Is all these specific traditions that are never quite captured by fictional depictions of the world that are so important to the way that we live. There's so much just random ephemera that makes up our cultural milieu. Some random restaurateur did something stupid on his grill, and now it's like an enshrined local tradition that like everybody has to eat this one weird fucked up thing. All these little specific things that's just the things that make the world feel so much more rich and colorful, and lived in and true. And that's I feel like an underrated aspect of what makes these shows so addictive to me, I guess.
Yeah, totally. And one of the things that stood out to me while I was watching New York this week, or throughout this season, actually, is how much the local geography really adds a lot of depth to
Mm-hmm.
these shows. Like watching this brand new cast kind of operate within New York, it's almost like watching a sculptor carving a map out of rock and seeing all these kind of landmarks and these famous neighborhoods be uncovered by these housewives as they're operating. Like um just this past episode of New York that we're watching, we hear Erin say that she doesn't like going above Canal Street, and
Right.
just
That
like
had me
getting
racing to Google Maps. Where's Canal Street again? I gotta know what she's talking about.
yeah,
All right, the
exactly.
upper
But
limit of Tribeca, I think. All right, I
yeah.
got it. Okay, yeah.
But just like seeing how these people and how they operate within these cities and their neighborhoods and their communities. um we yes, there are a lot of inorganic pieces of Real Housewives and they're thrown together in inorganic situations, but still behind all of that, we still get to see them how they operate as people within these these communities and these spaces and these like, yeah, the physical spaces that they operate in. Um, we see that shine through, and it's really interesting to see how strong of a grasp that relationship has on people, you know, how it influences the way that you work and act and live. We see that on such like a small scale, like the neighborhoods of New York, and also on like a broad scale. Like it feels to me like there's like a distinct difference between East Coast and West Coast housewives. There's like kind of a tonal difference between them that is really, it's really it's really present, and that it mirrors the idea that I've got in my head of the East and West Coast of the United States. So I find that really interesting watching these shows.
Totally. And we talked in other episodes, Craig, about the suburban landscape and how that affects things. And that's really, on my mind. There's this richness, I've said many times, to New York and to excuse me, New Jersey. Even though there is a suburban element to it, there's just this, like, I guess, cultural depth that, like, Dylan was talking about. And in the California shows, like, it just feels empty. It's like this void, and it's like suburbs. There's not enough going on there. This idea of culture and heritage feels empty there too. And I don't know if, like, that's just sort of this narrative that we have of, it's kind of this neutral culture. I don't know. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, just thinking about the example that we're seeing this season where Taylor, who was previously on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, joined the cast of Orange County. If you were to typically see a housewife make an appearance on, you know, a different franchise, it feels almost like an exchange student. Like there's a cultural exchange that happens there. I remember, like, when I first started watching Real Housewives, I think it was a Beverly Hills trip that went to New York, and like Bethany made an appearance, and it was like, oh, worlds colliding, but this is still like really interesting, and it felt like a cultural exchange. Whereas, you know, Taylor going from Beverly Hills to Orange County doesn't have that same kind of weight to it. And I mean, yes, it's not as much of a geographic leap, but also I think, like you said, Sandy, the kind of the landscape of suburban LA and maybe LA proper, there's just not a very distinct culture between the two. Even though Beverly Hills definitely is going for a more higher echelon of wealth than Orange County, it's still, she doesn't feel very out of place.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think in Orange County in particular, I've described it as just white women in the void, because it's just such like a cultural, like empty, like liminal zone that they inhabit, which is one of the things I love about it. And I think it's comparing New York to OC is really interesting, because in both cases, they're not shows that are really showcasing people who have strong regional traditions from the area they're in, right? It's in both cases there are people who come from other places who are there in most cases, right? Like maybe Aaron is a real New Yorker or whatever, some of them are, but mostly it's people who come from outside and who end up there. And Orange County, it's the same thing, but you're on opposite ends of the spectrum in the sense that in Orange County, it's like a parking lot. It's a cultural void, where in New York, it has such a distinct cultural identity that it's like an impressive thing. Like wherever you come from, there's so much pressure to destroy your regional cultural identity once you arrive in New York, because the city itself imposes all these very precise definitions based on specific neighborhoods and specific codes and stuff like that. So I think it's really interesting to compare the two as like places where people from other parts of America have clustered. And in New York, there's like a punishing pressure almost to like to forget where you're from. In an Orange County, it'll be like, you have two women from the Midwest being like, oh, we both like ordered a cocktail and a Pepsi at the same time. That's such a Midwest thing. And clinging to these bizarre shreds of like a geographically located cultural heritage as like bits of flotsam in the middle of the ocean, like just grabbing onto anything as a life raft because they're just living in these vacuous McMansions with no culture anywhere in sight, no history, no sense of place.
Yeah, that's a really
It's
good
great.
point. I forgot about that one. That was, yeah. Do you guys relate to the shows you watch based on your experience with the locations? Because that's something I was thinking about. I've gushed about New York a lot to Craig, and I love it. So I'll watch anything that takes place there. I find that these shows can be a little bit like travel. You know, you're getting that, as we're talking about, that experience to an extent. And I find that I relate to shows more where I've been there. I have a connection to the place, even if it's just as a tourist once or twice. But there's a few shows that come to mind, and there's a couple. There was Texicanas, and that was a Bravo one-off season, unfortunately, about women in San Antonio, Texas, that had Mexican heritage. So it was kind of culture based. That was the premise, which I thought was interesting, maybe a bit heavy handed, but at the same time, I think that's interesting, and I think it was cool. And they wove that into the stuff that was going on, which was also just regular drama. And there was also Mexican dynasties that took place in Mexico City, and was 3 families. It was a little goofy, but I really liked it. And those are both places I've been. San Antonio, very randomly for a work trip, and then we stayed and toured. But it really made me connect to the show, and I like the premise as well, that they were kind of leaning into that cultural aspect and showed some diversity, which is always nice. And I don't know. So I don't know if you guys have watched either of those or have thoughts on how you relate in that way.
Yeah, I've been to like very few actual housewife cities. Like I think I've been to New York is I went on a work trip, but aside from that, I haven't really spent a lot of time in um, any of the housewife cities. So I think New York is probably the one that I've got the most kind of understanding of and like grounding, but that doesn't come from my lived experience going there. It's mostly informed by the media that I
Mhm.
watch, and it's interesting to see how different, the sort of real New York that I have been presented with on these shows is from the one that like I've seen portrayed in popular culture. Like there's definitely like clear parallels, but to see it on Real Housewives, it feels so much more like a living, working, organic city than anything that could be shown within a fictional presentation.
Yeah, most of these cities I'm entirely unfamiliar with. Like I'm definitely familiar with New York, but like I think like Craig, I'm mostly like referencing like Scorsese movies in my mind rather than like
Yeah.
personal memories. The one
Okay.
show where I do that with, I think, is probably Vanderpump Rules, because I do know LA a little bit, and I do think that show does actually have like a great sense of LA as a place in a way that Beverly Hills doesn't, because it's not like really in LA, but Vanderpump Rules kind of is. And there's definitely moments where like they go to a place where I've been to it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's so cool.
And I know, like if I were there, my whole trip, the only reason I'll go to LA again is to do like a Vanderpump Rules restaurant tour. So that's
Yeah.
otherwise you won't see me there, but that would make it worth it for me. So place based, like it's these places. I mean, of course they own half the restaurants, but it's yeah, it would be really cool to just kind of walk the places they walk. I went to Florence really quick. Went to Florence, and all we did was go to all the places that Jersey Shore cast went to when they did their season there. It's a lot of key museums, but we did some pizza
That's
places
amazing.
that they went to.
Yeah. I was just thinking about the international Housewives franchises that I've watched, which is only the Canadian ones, and how. So there's Real Housewives of Vancouver and Real Housewives of Toronto, and I feel like both of those did an okay job of capturing those cities, which are 2 cities that I'm a lot more familiar with than any of the American franchises. But still, I think that that's one of the things that is kind of lacking about those productions is there isn't the same sort of attention to detail in terms of capturing the space that they're in. It's kind of just take this format and cast people from that city, as opposed to actually try to like capture some of the regional not charm, but the regional flavor.
Mm. Yeah, I haven't seen those, but there was a lot of good regional flavor, and that one where they had like hockey wives, that was a good show.
Oh, I haven't watched Hockey Wise. I should.
When
I
you were
should
saying
check
that,
that
I was thinking like, oh, which one have I seen? I've seen one of those. Then I remembered. Oh no, it wasn't either of those. It was the Hockey Wife show that I watched.
You should definitely watch Real Housewives of Vancouver, though. It is very good. Real Housewives of Toronto, you can totally skip because that one was a waste of time.
Yeah, that Vancouver got out of control.
Oh, go ahead.
Like it literally didn't it get canceled because it was too dangerous for them to be together or something? I remember hearing that. Anyway, it's intense.
Oh, what?
Yeah, there was restraining orders against each other. It was pretty wild.
Okay, I do want to see that now. If you could pick one Canadian city to do Real Housewives, then which one would you pick?
Oh, Montreal for sure.
Oh yes.
Yeah. I think it would be fun to do something like East Coast. Do like Halifax. Yeah, no, St. John's would be even better. Like just like really like thickly accented weirdos. Have like some like fish barons and I don't know, lobster catchers, like the richest lobster catcher's wife. I think that'd be fun.
I'm gonna vote for
Yeah,
Regina.
I think like
Regina.
Yeah, that'd be like Winnipeg. I'd feel like it's the worst match for a housewife city. Just there's not a high degree of wealth or glamour here. But I could see like a place like Calgary, which is a city.
That makes total sense.
I hate Calgary as a city, but I could see it being a good fit for a housewife.
There's a lot of new wealth there, so it makes sense.
Yeah, totally.